Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. As you mentioned, we're a grassroots organization that's looking to make change in Claremont. Not even just here, but we eventually want to be able to spread our awareness and our ability to create change to our our neighboring cities as well. So, yeah, I'm Josue Barnes. I'm a resident of Claremont. I grew up there. Went to Chaparral, went to Roble, went to Claremont High School. I did track, I did theater, choir, football, did it all. Um, After that, I went to UC Santa Barbara for undergrad, where I studied biological sciences. Um, Came across a few experiences that I'll share about later in our discussion. Uh, After that, I then felt like I really wanted to work with people in a way that I could help them. My father had passed away when I was 16 years old from complications due to diabetes. And so I always just wanted to get involved somehow in medicine and research in some aspect. So after I graduated, I worked as a caregiver for a year, working with elderly patients who were post-operation and just in need of assistance, who were truly vulnerable and just needed someone there to care for them. And that was an incredibly humbling experience. After that, I did research over at City of Hope, where I was working on the development of neoplastic drugs. These are anti-cancer drugs. And so I started recognizing, uh, that want to help others. And so I decided to then apply to graduate school, where I am now in my third year by PhD in a physiology, biophysics, and systems biology program at Weill Cornell Medical College in Manhattan. And I carry out really awesome research to see how we can improve outcomes for patients who undergo in vitro fertilization.
Yeah, thanks, Josue. I want to make sure before we go, is our audio level okay? Can everybody
That's right.
hear us well? Yeah? Okay, awesome. Um, yeah, my name's Noah Winnick. Also sort of a similar story. Well, only for the schools that we went to in the beginning. So I went to Chaparral, Roble, and Claremont High School. Josue and I met through Miss Elhigh and theater at CHS, and then did track and field as well. After graduating from Claremont High School, I went off to Occidental College, which is a little liberal arts school in the LA area. Worked at Kaiser Permanente for a while afterwards on the patient care side, and now am sitting in my LA apartment, finishing up the second year of my master's degree in public policy at USC. Not exactly how I expected, 90% of my master's program to be online, but so it is. But yeah, I think in Sway, we can alter it if we want to go. I think sort of what Sway and I wanted to do today was introduce ourselves to you and sort of how this all came about, and talk about ways that everyone can get involved. And so Sway, I'll pass it to you to sort of talk about, the protest, I think is where we should start, and how that came about.
Right. So, a lot of you may have seen that video of George Floyd and the killing. That's what prompted a lot of what we're doing today. It took me a couple days to watch that video. I knew what was in it, and I just couldn't really bring myself to watch it because I knew that, here we are again, another Black man being killed by a police officer. People are going to talk about it for a couple weeks, and then it's just going to go away. It's going to happen again. And the cycle just always tends to repeat itself. And finally, a few days later, I watched the video, and everything I knew I would felt was confirmed. I was angry, I was sad, and I was hopeless that nothing would change. And then, that Friday after his killing, I walked over to Foothill and Indian Hill. And you all may have seen that the Claremont High School students were on those corners every single day for almost 3 weeks protesting. And when I walked out there and saw that, I started crying because I recognized that people did care this time, that not everyone was going to stand for this anymore, that it wasn't just the Black community that was sick and tired of this. Everyone was tired of this. Our youth are tired of this. They don't want to live in a world where this is the norm. And that encouraged me to do more, you know. So I took to social media that same evening and shared a story about my experiences as a Black man, in Claremont, in New York, uh, in college, what that was like for me. And the biggest takeaway that I wanted for people to see was that our normal is not your normal. My day-to-day experience is not the same as yours, right? When I leave the house, I have to figure out, how can I be less threatening to people? How can I not put a spotlight on myself when I walk outside of the house or when I go for a run in Claremont? How do I make people feel comfortable around me? And that's such a, it's such a weird existence to have, and this, to have to conceptualize that and then internalize it for years. I've been dealing with that since I was in high school. And I can remember even early experiences as far back as elementary school, being the only Black kid in a space and having to understand that that's just how things were in Claremont. And so that was that whole story of, you know, how we have to live this different existence is what led us to the March 9 Mile protest. You know, I looked over at Noah. I was like, you know, this story I've shared with everyone was received really well. I had a lot of people reaching out saying, I never knew. I never knew. And that's the truth. A lot of people don't know. They don't know what that experience is like for us. And so I said, we need to make this bigger somehow. We need to give people an idea of what it's like to live in our shoes. And that's where the March Mile in Our Shoes protest came from, right? And the whole idea was to give the Black residents of Claremont and our neighboring cities a chance to share their stories, their experiences with racism, their experiences with implicit bias by police. And that was just such a powerful, powerful protest. I mean, even the stories I heard up there gave me chills. Hearing a mother talk about how she won't let her 3 Black sons ride in the same car for fear that they'll be looked at as a gang and pulled over and called out of their car. That's a genuine concern for parents who have students or children of color, you know, and that's the reality of it. Even I remember those talks with my dad. Be mindful of who you're around. Make sure that if you're stuck with the police, listen to them. Don't do anything dumb that would get you in trouble. That's what those talks were about. You know, I wasn't allowed to really go out on Fridays and Saturday nights because there was such a concern that I might get in trouble, while all my friends were at the movies having a good time. And I didn't really understand as a kid. So, you know, the protest was just a really powerful moment, I think, for the city. I think it raised a lot of awareness to people, and it raised a lot of support. I was shocked. I was honestly expecting maybe 300, 400 people. And just to see Memorial Park and Korea Park just filled, almost 1,300, 1,500 people there supporting us, who recognize that we're not okay with the status quo anymore. That meant so much to us. And we knew from there, like, this is great, this is awesome, but this, again, is just the first step of many. We have so much more to do. What can we do? And so, Noah, I don't know if you want to pick up from there.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think, you know, part of this, and this is speaking, you know, obviously as a white middle class male, is, for me, I always felt, and I'm sure a lot of you have felt this way. I always felt like I knew what was going on. I always felt like I understood it, like I had a sense of, this exists, but it doesn't happen in Claremont, right? Like, this might exist somewhere else, but these issues don't exist in Claremont. And to look back now, I feel so naive, right? I feel like we should have known. Right, and right next to me, my best friend had all these stories that I hadn't heard before, right? About how he was forced to code switch, and how he was forced to sort of adapt to this norm that shouldn't be, It just shouldn't be. And it's 2020, and it shouldn't have been 100 years ago, and it shouldn't be now. And Claremont is not exempt from these issues. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we can work together as a community, all different, the faith community, us, everybody else, the city council, we can all sort of work together and try to create this change that we want to see. And that's, I think that's what Claremont Change is. I mean, Claremont Change is not some aggressive, angry group yelling about something. No, very much the opposite. We're really, really organized, and we're strategic, and we're working with every single group in the city to listen. And I think that's what Sway and I really started in the beginning is we went on a listening tour. I mean, Sway can attest to this. We talked to, I don't know, had 100 individual Zoom meetings or something like that with people all across, everywhere from the Quaker group to Sycamore Diversity, Equity, Inclusion group, and so on, and speaking and just listening and hearing what people thought. And that's, you know, I don't consider myself to be necessarily a man of faith, but I think in that sense, it really did give me hope. And it gave me optimism that there was a path that we could go together and make something happen. And I think that's, to get into sort of the next step, would talk about exactly what we're doing. So Claremont Change is, and just to clarify, you know, we are literally a grassroots organization. We're not a 501c3. We're not a PAC. We're literally just Josue and I and a group of advisors that decided to name ourselves something. And, you know, that's what we are. We have a group of about 5 advisors, brilliant people from Claremont that volunteer their time to sit and listen to Josue and I talk a lot and answer questions, because they know a hell of a lot more than we do. And we have been, you know, at city council meetings, we've been at police commission meetings, we've been at school board meetings. And part of what we realized is that issues of equity touch every aspect of Claremont, right? Whether you're talking about city council, about the police department, education, it's systematic, it's everywhere, right? We have an armed police officer that goes onto our campuses that we spend $150,000 a year on as a city and a district. But we don't have great mental health resources for our students. So you can ask yourself, is it worth $150,000 when maybe we could spend some of that money on mental health services in the city? Would that not be more important for our kids? I think so. And that's something that we need to look into. Our budget is, yeah, go ahead, Sway.
A big focus of what we're doing is trying to really do an analysis. You know, are we addressing the root of these problems? When you're talking about why does there need to be an SRO on campus? Is it to mitigate any student situations that might get out of hand? Well, what's leading to those? Why do you need an SRO on campus? And that's why we feel, you know, maybe we need to re-examine this. Is it because students need mental health counseling? Do they need the help before situations escalate? Is that what we need to be doing? When we look at our cities and we look at homelessness, what are we doing about homelessness? What are we doing about crime? Why is crime coming up in the first place? Crime comes out of despair. It comes out of needing to supplement and to survive, right? What if we address those issues? Do we reduce crime? Is there then a less of a need for more police presence? Because having more police right now, as it stands, isn't solving all of our problems. We still have homelessness. We still have major poverty. What are we doing as a community to make sure that we're looking out for each other, though? Because, you know, calling on a homeless person because they're outside of your business, causing a ruckus, that's not helping them. That's not addressing the issue at hand. That doesn't address that they need some mental health counseling, that they need a place to sleep, that they need food, that they need opportunities. That's what we're trying to address as Claremont Change. What can we do as a community to make sure that the most vulnerable are getting the help, the resources, and the opportunities that they need to live an equitable life?
Yeah, and I think that's well said. And that's, we sort of talk about the BandAid, right? We can keep putting a BandAid on these issues, but that's not going to solve them. And And I think the really, really important piece that Sway and I try and stress is that we can do this. And I mean that as a community, we can really solve these issues. We have 17 people who are unsheltered in Claremont. That's not acceptable. We can solve that problem. We should solve that problem. Now, I'm glad it went down from 29 to 17 over the last year and a half, but we can do better, and we should. Right? I mean, there are active things we can do as a community, and I don't want to get too into the numbers, but I went back and was feeling a little bit nerdy, and I decided to look at 10 years of Claremont budget and just wanted to see what the city was spending money on. And what I found was pretty on point with the national trend, but still a little bit upsetting, is that human services, right, the department in our city that provides services for our youth and for our seniors, has the cooling centers and various other things that are very, very important to community. That's right. They've been consistently had their budget cut over the last 10 years. Either it stayed the same or it's gone down. Rarely ever goes up. The police department budget, on the other hand, goes up. Now, part of that is because of pensions and salary, right? But that's all about contract negotiation. It makes up this year, and I'll say this so everybody can hear it, the police budget this year for 2020, 2021 makes up 52% of our total general fund expenditures for the city. It's about 13.5 million, and I think our human services budget is somewhere like 2.1 or something like that. And one of the things that one of our brilliant advisors, Christine Margiata, was telling us about, and I love this phrase, is that she said that a budget is a document that shows priorities, right? The city's budget shows what they believe the priorities are of the city, which means that's what they think the public wants. And we don't think that's true. We don't think our city wants that. We think our city cares about our seniors, cares about our youth, our unsheltered community. And if we believe that, we need to show that, right? We need to invest in those communities in our city, right? Because if we're not protecting the most vulnerable among us, who are we? And are we really meeting the mission statement of Claremont? And I think we can. I think we can get there. But I'll get off my soapbox. So go ahead, Sway.
Yeah, as Noah's saying, the budget really does reflect our priorities. I mean, when we're talking about a 7% increase in funding to the police and a nearly 8% decrease to human services, it really puts into question, what are we doing? Who decided this? And is that what we truly want as a community? Or do we as a community want to help our neighbors? Do we want to help our brothers and sisters who are on the streets, who need assistance? Is that where our priority should be? Or are we just more concerned with our personal property? Is that all we're concerned with? Why are we seeing these continuous cuts to human services, such a necessary component of any city? Why are we doing this? And so a part of this comes into holding city council's feet to the fire and asking those questions. Why are we doing this? What can we do to be better? Moving forward, are we going to continue with this same general trend of defunding human services? And, it's concerning. And it's a trend that we see nationally, and we have to really figure out as a community, not just as individuals, not as city council representatives, as an entire community, what we want. And that's why we push for so many folks to come out to these meetings, city council meetings, police commission meetings, all the commission meetings. We have to be involved. The school board meetings, those are just as important too, right? Because we need to be aware of what direction our future generations are going to take. We dictate that. We have the voice to change course. But if we don't show up, if we don't speak out, nothing changes. The status quo remains. We end up in this cycle that ends up who knows where. And so we have to put the onus on each other. We have to get rid of self-interests and start putting others ahead of ourselves. It can't always be about me, what's going to benefit me. It's about what's going to benefit all of us. What's going to help the man who I've seen in the village asking for money since I was in the 6th grade. Same gentleman. What are we going to do about him? What are we going to do to help him and make sure that he doesn't have to beg for money anymore? You know, it goes so far beyond us. And if anything, that this whole pandemic, this uprising for social justice has made me realize, and made Noah realize too, is that it's so much bigger than us. We're so fortunate to have what we have. We're so fortunate to have a roof over our heads, for a lot of us to have formal educations, for us to live in good homes, to have good families. It's not the same. And so for those people who it's not the same for, what are we doing? How are we lending out a hand to make sure that they are in as secure of a position as we are, that they live as just of a life, have the equal opportunities that we all have? And so, you know, if anything, yeah, I think someone mentioned it here in the chat that addressing that city budget is a part of your mission plan for this exact reason, right? We are all aware of it, so we all need to be a part of that, of those discussions, to really get city council to say, all right, the people have spoken. We need to readdress this. It's not working. The old way isn't working. What's the new way? How are we going to move forward?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I want to really thank you all for having us, and we don't want to just speak at you guys for the whole time. So we really want to open up for questions as well, and we'll try to answer everything we can. But this means a lot to us, and I'm speaking for both of us. I really thank you for having us and giving us this opportunity to speak to you. And we'll open up for questions. However, you guys typically do it. Let us know, and we're here.
All right. Thank you so much, Noah and Josue, for sharing with us a little bit about your vision and what you're working on. We're going to open it up for questions, everyone. So you can use the raise hand feature if you want, and we can call on you, or you can just unmute and ask a question. If you want to put it in the chat, that's great as well. So Sandy put one in the chat here, and then we'll go to Tomas. Sandy says, I'm extremely encouraged because of your youth. It is inspiring, and you are excellent role models for leadership of such a grassroots group. What can you most use in support and action from the large senior community of Claremont?
Noah?
That's a really good question. Well, I think there are a few things. One is we need to be talking about these issues. So that's one thing I think everybody can do, is we need to be talking about these issues. We need to be talking about it with our friends, with our families. If you can show up to a city council meeting, if you can write a letter in, if you can be there, we host our Claremont Change meetings on the Tuesdays when there isn't a city council meeting. That might sound confusing, but city council is every 2 Tuesdays. When there isn't a city council meeting, there is a Claremont Change meeting. And our website is claremontchange.org. So we'll post opportunities there where you're welcome to, everyone is welcome from the community to come join us, to listen, to participate. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things is to get involved at every level. But go ahead, Sway, if you got a better answer, do it.
We have to, when we're looking at our senior community, what we have to remember the experience, the expertise, the wisdom that's there, right? It's great. Noah and I, all the other young folks who are coming in and trying to make change, we all have these great, fresh perspectives. But what we don't have is the experience and the wisdom that the senior community has. You all could provide so much insight into how we can address these issues, or things that maybe we're not considering, our approaches, our strategy. Those collaborative ideas is what we want. When I say bringing together the community to have these discussions, it's for that exact reason. We bring the fresh perspectives, but we want the knowledge as well. We want the wisdom. We want insight. What are we completely missing? Are we missing anything? That kind of advisory, that kind of guidance is so amazingly powerful in having these discussions and developing plans to fix these issues, right? It comes in that aspect. It comes in, community discussions. That's a huge part. We want you to show up to those. But then when you feel strongly about something that's on the agenda for city council, Even if it's not, it's something that can be written into public comment. Show up. It's the power. We have power in numbers. That's the biggest thing that people have to realize, is that city council moves because the people want change. The reason Claremont Change has had so much success is because we're able to mobilize people. We're able to get people who have stories of being pulled over and harassed by a police officer. We're able to get them on the police commission meetings so that they can share those experiences, so that it's no longer hearsay that it might happen. No, it does happen, right? We prove to them that there are issues. Without people coming up and speaking about those issues, they kind of just brush it off, like any politician would. Until people start making a ruckus, until people start making awareness around these things, they aren't going to give us the time of day. They're not even going to agendize the items. But with a large amount of support, with a wave of support, we can get any topic of discussion onto the agenda. That's how we infiltrate into city council without having to be on city council. We have to remember that they represent us, right? They represent our interests. We are the taxpayers at the end of the day. We should be deciding where the money goes. We should be deciding the direction of our community. We should be deciding who we're taking care of. This is all up to us. And so it's great, your church is very involved in the community. You have a lot of outreach that you do. But what's that next step? How do we make permanent change? How do we make permanent, meaningful, and impactful change? It comes at the city level. You have to get policies changed. You have to get policies created to make sure that we no longer go down this path of defunding human services, of ignoring the homeless issues. As Noah mentioned, there's 17 homeless people in Claremont. 17, not a lot. Why aren't we addressing this already? More recently, one of the council members worked on using funding from the San Gabriel Valley Fund to start an initiative over on Baseline to create low-income housing for the seniors. 8 units go to, I believe, Tri-City Mental Health, and 7 others to our own city, right? That's a great first step. But what about everybody else? If that's 17 and we're taking up, 9 seniors, 8 seniors off the streets, okay, that leaves us with 9. We shouldn't be waiting 2 years to get those 9 peoples the help that they need. That's the fact. So we need to show up. We need to start putting pressure on city council to create those changes. And it's not even just putting pressure on city council. You put pressure, but the other step is making sure you have the correct officials in place. Who are the local officials with the same ideas, who have the same beliefs, who aren't scared to go against the grain and push these initiatives, right? So that comes up in our local elections. You have to look at, where do people stand currently on city council? What is their history in terms of voting on these issues? Do they avoid them? Do they vote against them? Do they even bring them up? Is it not one of their priorities? We have to look at those. We have to examine in totality the city council, their history, and our relationship to that.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you. I think that this congregation, as you said, has a long history of being involved in social issues, but as we think about ways to create change now and tackle current problems, a lot of it is we could have these opinions, but we have to show up at the meetings in order to express those opinions so they can be heard by local decision makers and leaders. Yeah. And they need to know that people have these opinions. We've got a lot of great questions in the chat. Oh, I just want to also say Sandy Gable, who asked that question, has a long history of working with the Claremont Homeless Advocacy Program and tackling these exact issues. So I'm glad that these connections can be made and people with these similar passions can be working on the issues together. Sure. Dr. Morales, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, first of all, let me thank you for being here, and just so I'm inspired by your leadership. And I have 2 grandchildren in the Claremont school system, and if they turn out like both of you, I'll be a very happy granddad. Thank you. But a couple of weeks ago, several weeks ago, we were shocked to learn that the Claremont High School does not have one African American teacher on their faculty. And I'm curious, I mean, for me, that was shocking as an educator. And so, you know, for me, I'm curious to get your perspective as two young men who have gone through their entire K-12 experience in Claremont. Why do you think Claremont High School has not one Black faculty member in 2020? I'm curious to get your perspective on that.
So, okay. So this is actually a really big topic to me. We have to look at the education system itself first. Now, let me say this much. Even at my time at CHS, that was from 2006 to 2010, I had 2 Black teachers. Mr. Payne for geometry and Ms. Dixon for AP Lit. 2 Black teachers. At El Roble, I had 1. Mr. Ruzon, US or the Social Studies and Global Studies teacher. 3 Black teachers in my entire time in the Claremont Unified School District system. That was it. We have to understand how important representation is for students. Being able to see someone who looks like you means that they understand where you're coming from. They understand your struggles. They understand your challenges, right? That's the key there. And not only that, they motivate you. When you see someone that looks like you, who gets you, who's gone through what you've gone through, and they're still in a position where they're a mentor to students, where they're teaching students, that makes you look back and think, wow, I kind of want to be like that teacher. They were so impactful and meaningful to me. I could be impactful and meaningful to someone else. Now, when we look at why are there so few Black teachers? Well, this comes back down to our education system. What are we emphasizing, right? If we go back into these school systems and we look who's working with these kids, we start recognizing that it's a cycle, right? If these kids aren't being encouraged to become teachers, then that means in future generations, the pool for picking those teachers is going to be slim pickings, right? Because every other school is now trying to reach this issue. They're trying to draw out those Black teachers to their schools so they don't get looked at as being, biased, right? And so how do we fix this? We have to go back. We have to go to the current generation of students and start encouraging them. Hey, start thinking about a career in education. Think about how impactful that can be to your community, right? So that 2-3 generations from now we have a pool of Black applicants who can be teachers. That there's a surplus of teachers of color who can show up and speak out, right? And I think that's one place where we have to start is kind of addressing and we have to be better at counseling our students. I think that's what it ultimately comes down to, right? And giving them career options. What are the options that they have? What advice are they getting? I remember as a student at Claremont High School, my counselor was great and all, but I was discouraged from going to a UC, okay? And I wasn't even told what major options there were for me. For me, all I knew was, all right, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer. Never did it cross my mind that I could be an engineer, that I could be a computer scientist, that I could be a psychologist, right? Never did that cross my mind. It was always, what can I do that will make me more money to help my family? And that's where a lot of the thought process is for students, right? You see a lot of Black and brown students going into sports, following scholarships in sports, because that's one way out. It's one way to help their families, but there's so much more that you can do to help your family and help your community. right? When I went to college, I recognized this firsthand. I created a startup like outreach program. It was called Sidetrack. And the whole initiative was to work with underfunded students, often Black and brown students who were in remediated science classes, and get them interested in science. I had about 6 organizers who I worked with who were all white people. They were a great help, but when we were in that classroom setting, the students did not respond well to that. It was always, Josue, can you come work with me? Josue, can you show us how to do this? Josue, can you explain this? Because they feel a better connection there. They feel like there's a better understanding there. And that's when I realized, wow, even at this small of a level, it's making a difference. At this small of a level, kids are they're not consciously aware that they're making these decisions on their own either, right? They're just looking for that representation. They're looking for that person that looks like them, who can understand them. And that's always been my big thing. As I've gone through my education system, or through my education career, college, I never had one professor of color in the sciences, not one. Biology, chemistry, physics, across the board, not one at UC Santa Barbara. I'm at Weill Cornell Medical College now, not one single Black professor in the entire university. Cornell Medicine, not one. So we see that it's an issue that starts from the bottom and continues to flow up. And as generations go on, if we don't start filling that pool with these brilliant Black and brown minds who can teach, who can bring fresh perspectives and ideas to research, to science and medicine, we're losing out on so much there. And so we have to get back to our school systems and say, hey, let's refocus this. Let's make our student counseling better. Let's make our mental health counseling better. If you can, draw out, give teachers incentives to come teach at your school. You know, I think a lot of Black and brown teachers are going to start looking at schools and start asking, what is your school doing to address these issues? And do I want to be a part of that? Are you implementing a curriculum about Africana and Latinx studies? That's big to a lot of people because we need to start raising awareness about it. We need to start telling the true history of all Americans, not just some. We need implicit bias training so that students don't feel like they're being outcasted. These are all small things that schools have to do to break that cycle. So the way that we address this is, I think, just that. We have to show that we aren't just talking the talk. We have to walk the walk at our schools. And that in of itself, I think, will help bring in the limited number of professors or teachers of color into the school system.
Yeah, thank you so much. If anyone didn't catch, we had a presentation from Dr. Tyrone Howard out of UCLA a few weeks ago, and that's what Dr. Morales was referencing. It's on our YouTube channel. You've got to watch it. But he was talking about in the questions that, you know, one of the best ways to close the achievement gap in schools is for students to have teachers and resources that reflect their racial and ethnic identities. And to have currently no Black professors at Claremont High School is not acceptable. And so if we want to create a list of things we need to be advocating for right now, to be showing up to the school board meetings and saying that's not acceptable, that's definitely one issue. And Claremont's creating a diversity and inclusion task force right now to kind of look at some of these issues. And so when that task force gets formed, that should be something we're on them about. All right, we've got a lot of great questions. So let's try to get to as many.
Can I add just one quick
jump in.
note?
Go ahead.
If I may, I spent a good many years as dean of faculty at Cal State LA. That meant that I supervised the hiring of every faculty member in every department for some years. Part of the way you get minority faculty is you basically say to the department chairs and you say to the people on the search committee, or you say to the high school principal, or you say to the head of that department, I expect you to have a diverse pool. If you don't have a diverse pool, you will keep looking. Show me that you went to the school, that you made an attempt. Show me in writing where you made an attempt to go to the schools that are generating the people of color. There are universities who are, Spelman, Howard, what have you. Have you recruited there? Have you written to them? Have you talked to their department chairman? When you have a diverse pool, then you can go forward and you can start winnowing that pool, and we'll see who you hire. We're not requiring you to hire someone of color, but we're requiring you, as a condition of your employment as chair, or you won't stay chair, I expect you to have a diverse pool every time you hire. We did it. We have a diverse faculty. We have one of the most diverse faculty in the country. It can be done. Is one condition for the high school principal and for the various supervisors in the high school and the other schools, a condition. We will evaluate you and your performance on whether or not you are recruiting minority faculty. You do a bad job of that, you may be looking for a job. I mean, this isn't magic, and this isn't rocket science. It can be done.
Yeah, I think, a huge part of that does come into active recruitment, right? Are you doing your due diligence to seek out those teachers? Because if you're just expecting them to show up, well, then statistically speaking, your chances are pretty low.
Can I just add one other factor? The last Black teacher at Claremont High School, from what I understand, in part left because she was uncomfortable because she was the only Black teacher. That's the other thing. Are we creating an environment where minority teachers want to work here, want to be here? Is the community open to them? If the community feels uncomfortable and they feel uncomfortable being here, why would they come to work here? We have a responsibility for this.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was meaning. It's one thing to talk the talk, but are we walking the walk? Are we making the environment? Are we bringing about the awareness? Are we changing the curriculum that Black and brown teachers want to see for them to work in our schools? Because if we're not, of course they're not going to come. It makes complete sense.
Thank you very much for that wisdom. That was great.
I have to. That was my dad, so you can see where the passion comes from in the family.
Awesome. That's great. Linda asks, what is the most hopeful thing that has happened since you started Claremont Change?
That's a fantastic question. I read that earlier, and I was trying to think about it. And this one might sound kind of small, but it is one of the most amazing things ever. I live right on 10th Street. I'm in LA, but when I was in Claremont, I was on 10th Street for a while, and I go on a run, a couple times a week I would go on a run, and I'd run down over the mountain, and I'd run down towards the Jocelyn Center and across and whatnot. And as Claremont Change started and people began, the momentum started to increase. People got signs. They got those Claremont Change signs, and they put them in their yards. And as you're running around, you start seeing these signs popping up in different houses that say Claremont Change. And I think it was the most inspiring thing to me, because as we saw, you went, my goodness, there are so many people in this city who are with this, who care, who want to see this. And it was this tangible thing you could see all across the city. There were these Claremont Change signs popping up. And for me, that was one of the first things that was just so impactful. I think the second thing has been, while we're not done in any way at any of these levels, we have seen some things happen, right? We have seen the police commission create committees, subcommittees, to look into issues of use of force, of community engagement, right? Of getting, for example, an online complaint form instead of making people, mail something in or handwrite it. Just ways to increase access and getting a little bit closer to equity. We're not there yet, but we're working on it. And I think those are some of the things that we've seen, is that you can make this progress. And every time you see one step in the right direction, it's uplifting, right? It's motivating. And I've loved to see that. And so we hope to see many more. But I would say that has been one of the most inspirational things, is to see the community come together and really show that support and be able to, even if something as simple as going for a jog, you can see a Claremont Change sign. And I love that.
Yeah. I'd second that. It's honestly just seeing the amount of support that we've gotten and the amount that support has resulted in credibility for our organization, right? So many people believe in what we're advocating for. I mean, sometimes I wonder, how could you not? But that wave of support that we've gotten, I think that's what's made me hopeful. Again, the 1,300 people coming out, the folks who show up to our Zoom meetings, the folks who are putting lawn signs out, liking even our social media stuff, that shows us that we're going down the right path. And that's what makes me hopeful that we will create the meaningful change that we've set ourselves out to create. It's not going to happen overnight, but so long as we have that support for the long run, I'm incredibly hopeful.
That's great. I'm going to combine two questions here.
Mm-hmm.
One, the first by Rolando Talbot, who we had on here a few weeks ago from the Police Commission. You two are in school and will soon be starting your careers, and there are so many young people inspired by what you're doing. What are you doing or plan on doing to continue to inspire youth and get them interested in making a difference? And kind of a part two to that question from Rachel, if you were talking to your younger self, what would you tell your younger self to better navigate the school system here? So what would you tell your younger self to navigate the school system, and what can today's youth do to continue to be part of creating change?
So I think joining organizations like the Claremont Disarm Hate Group, the Young Dems Club, the BSU at CHS, those are small things where at like a high school level, you can easily get involved in and start becoming more increasingly aware and start learning about how your voice can be heard. But then it goes beyond that. It is, there's the school board is actually creating a committee on diversity and equity, and they're allowing for students, parents, faculty to join in. You can apply for this. So I'd say that for students, a huge thing and a huge opportunity for your voice to be heard is applying for that committee, right? That it's literally being created for that. So joining that. In terms of what Claremont Change is trying to do to continue inspiring the youth, our focus right now, admittedly, is on the upcoming elections and how we can get ourselves involved in those elections and seeing where we can sway people where we can. So once those are over, I do want to put a refocus on what can we do to better engage the youth, right? How can we pull them in a little bit more? Like I said, you have a lot of kids already at Claremont Disarm Hate. We have meetings with them every once in a while where we discuss things and we come up with plans. And I'm so proud of them because they show up to the school board meetings in numbers, in huge numbers, speaking up. And it's awesome to hear their passion. Some people look at them when they speak out and they're just like, oh, they're just kids, like kind of just complaining about these issues, but they're not. They're kids who are trying to actively get involved and who are trying to actively create change. I'm not talking about just Black and brown students. There's white students showing up and speaking out too. And that's what they're showing, is that this isn't just about them. They're aware that their friends, their peers are dealing with these issues that they're not having to deal with. And so they're showing up to speak out. And their Black and brown students are saying, we're done with this. We're not dealing with this anymore. We're going to show up and speak out. So a big thing is finding those platforms on which you can be heard for the youth. I've told Noah that something that I really hope to create, once we get a little bit more funding and kind of get ourselves off the ground a little bit more, is that I'd actually love to create scholarships for students. A scholarship, whether it be for applying to colleges, that's certainly a barrier for a lot of students, is the cost. Whether it be just for a smaller scholarship just to help you out once you get to college, $1,000, $2,000 here or there, that helps kids a lot. I know that for me, that would have helped a lot when I was applying for colleges. I know a lot of schools aren't requiring SAT or standardized testing anymore, but in any capacity that we could help there to kind of bring down whatever financial barrier there is to students, I'd love to actually help there too. But I think the next step for us is gonna be involving bringing in some of that youth, right? Bringing in students from Claremont High School or wherever it may be, one or two of them or a couple of them, so that we get their insight as well. You know, it's not just the voices of our advisors and ourselves. We, again, want to be able to represent the voices of everyone. And those students have a huge say as well. So from the high school students to even the college students, we do want to get them involved and bring them into the role so that they can be a part of the process. In terms of what I would have told my younger self and how to navigate through the school system, find a mentor. You know, if you're not going to have a teacher of color, find a mentor of color, right? You have a lot of professors over at the Claremont colleges. Find a family friend who is a PhD, who is a doctor, who is a lawyer, who is a teacher, who is what you want to be, and have them mentor you. You know, that's how you can replace that lack of representation in the schools, is by seeking out mentorship on your own. It's not easy, but it's certainly worthwhile.
So we're gonna wind down. Barbara and Harry both had similar comments about collaborating with other local organizations or local cities. So our church represents 51 different cities in our membership. And so what we're talking about in Claremont, this same sort of change needs to happen in other cities. So if people want to collaborate with Noah and Josue to be starting Pomona Change and Upland Change and Rancho Change, Laverne Change, we need to be doing that as well. So thank you for your passion. Thank you so much for showing us what it looks like to take issues seriously, to work on them at a local level. We all talk about the national elections a lot, but we've got local issues to tackle as well. And I think you have provided a model for us of what it looks like to put what we believe and what we hope for into action. And so that is inspiring to us. So if we could all give them a digital round of applause so they could see our clapping. We are grateful for you. So thank you for your time. Give our best to Josue as well. We're sorry to lose him at the end here.
Yeah, I will. And I just wanted to I have to make one pitch because I'll get in trouble if I don't. Is that like I said, we have yard signs and we have t-shirts and we are entirely grassroots funded. So I know it was asked earlier how you could support. That is obviously one way if you're able to. If you can't, it's okay. But don't worry. But if you'd like to show a yard sign in your yard, you can go to ClaremontChange.org. They are there, and there are t-shirts as well. And we would love to start seeing them popping up around Claremont even more than they are now. But on behalf of Josue and I, thank you so, so much. We love these conversations. We hope to do more of them. And our email is ClaremontChange@gmail.com. We will hop on one-on-one Zooms if you'd like to talk more. We welcome advice and everything. We're students too, so we're always learning, and we welcome all that engagement. So again, thank you so much.